All right, so for this video, this is the Math 3, Module 6 and 7 review. I'm going to go over a few questions of these, starting with questions 10, which is the graphing trig, and then I'll go over 11 in this video as well. So for the graphing trig, there's a few pieces of this that I don't want you to worry about, and I did talk about this in class. I don't want you to worry about the domain and the range. I do want you to worry about all of these. And the separate review that we did about graphing sine and cosine, you needed these 4 key pieces of information. Amplitude, the midline, which is the vertical shift, the phase shift, and the period. So amplitude, remember, is just the A piece, what gets multiplied in front. So that's going to be 3. But let's add a little asterisk, knowing that since it's -3, we are going to create a trough first. The period is 2 pi over b. Well, b is the coefficient in front of our variable, which is just 1. So 2 pi over 1, which is 2 pi. That's how long it takes to repeat itself. The midline is what we are adding to at the very end, and since we are adding 0, that means our midline's at 0. And our phase shift, and I know this is getting a little clunky, is going to be C over B. Well, since we're adding 0 inside this input, it would be 0 over a B value of 1. So our phase shift is 0, meaning we start at x equals 0. All right, so our first step is to draw the midline, and I'll do it with the highlighter. That's where our midline is. That's where all the midline crossings are going to be. Let me erase these wonky ones. So we're going to start, since it's sine, we're going to start with the midline crossing where we're supposed to at 0. So midline crossing. We are going to go to our ending point, which is 2 pi away. So from 0, 2 pi away would be right here. We have another midline crossing. Directly in between those 2 midline crossings is another midline crossing. Directly in between the first 2 midline crossings typically would be a peak. But since we trough first because of this negative, we'll go right in between, and then we'll go down the distance of our amplitude. 1, 2, 3. And then in between our last 2 midline crossings, typically would be a trough, but since we are doing the flipped version, we go up 1, 2, 3. We connect the dots nice and smooth. We don't make it pointy. There is the first period of our graph. Just try to fill out the rest of the gap. You could fill out the rest of the pattern. Midline crossing, right in between trough, right in between peak. Keep it going. Midline crossing. This one, going back, would be a peak. Then it would be a trough. Boom, that's it. Letter B has a little bit more stuff going on. Again, don't worry about that. Amplitude is +3. The midline, or the vertical shift, is -4. The phase shift, even though it's not in there, we are adding 0 in there, so it'll be 0 over 1/2, which is 0. The period, 2 pi over b, which is 1/2, which we keep the top of the fraction, we change, and we flip the bottom, so that's going to be 4 pi. So it's going to take 4 pi for us to cycle through everything. Let's draw our midline at -4. I knew that was going to happen. Let's erase that. All right, so we got our midline here at -4. We start, since it's sine, we start with a midline crossing at our starting point of 0. We go to our ending point, 4 pi away at 4 pi. That's our last midline crossing. Directly in between these 2 midline crossings is another midline crossing. Directly in between these 2, and this time it would be at pi, we go up our distance of our amplitude. So 1, 2, 3. And since it's positive, now we peak first. In between our last two midline crossings, at 3 pi, we go down 1, 2, 3 to our trough. Connect the dots nice and smooth. And then we keep the pattern going. It looks like at 2 pi is the distance between our next midline crossing, so negative 2 pi. Directly in between those two would be our trough. Everything is nice and consistent. Letter C, this is cosine, which means the order in which we cycle through is different. We're not going to midline first and end with a midline. We're going to peak first and end with a peak. All right, so domain range, don't worry about. Amplitude 4, midline 3, the period 2 pi over b, which in this case our b is 2. The 2's cancel out, so our period is pi. Phase shift, we're adding nothing in there, so 0. Let's draw the midline at 3. It's going to get really annoying. It kind of looks like a heartbeat monitor. Yep. Let me erase those. It's just something messing up with my computer. Don't know how to fix it. All right, so there's our midline at 3. We start at 0, and since it's cosine, we're going to start with the peak. So from our midline, we go up our amplitude 1, 2, 3, 4. At 7, we have our peak. Our period away, so our period away would be 2 pi. We have our ending peak. Directly in between our two peaks is a trough, and that would be down 1, 2, 3, 4, the same distance of our amplitude, 4. Directly in between our peak and our trough is a midline crossing. Midline crossing, don't just make a V, make it nice and curved. And it's kind of scrunched up like an accordion, but we can add more colors. I'll do it in a different green. So every pi is our period. So there's our next peak, there's our next peak, there's our next peak. There is our next trough, a period of pi away, a period of pi away, a period of pi away. And then our midline crossings are not a period of pi away, but when it takes the time to repeat. So the next midline crossing where I'm going down, that's a distance of pi away. The next midline crossing where I'm going up is pi away. And we can just continue the pattern to fill out the rest of the graph. Again, don't make it super pointy. It's nice and curved. You could backfill it this way. All right, so for letter D, don't worry about that. Let's go back to maroon. Amplitude 4, vertical shift 3. I don't like this way that it's written out, so we'll rewrite it as f of x equals 4 cosine of 2x minus, when you distribute that, that'd be 6 pi over 4, which is 3 pi over 2 plus 3. I like a cleaner input instead of this multiple parentheses. This is helpful in different ways, but I don't think it's super helpful. All right, so the period, 2 pi over b, we end up having pi again. This time the phase shift, we get c over b. So 3 pi over 2 c over our b of 2, we end up getting 3 pi over 4. So that's our phase shift. So at 3 pi over 4 is where we start. So let's start through the process. Our midline is at 3. Yep, figured that was going to be the case. Let's erase all these. All right, so at 3 pi over 4, this is our starting point. So we're going to start with a peak since it's cosine. So from here we go up 1, 2, 3, 4. And then our period of pi, so that would take us to 7 pi over 4. That's a distance of pi. And then I'm just going to keep it going and going and going. 11 pi over 4, 15 pi over 4. I could backtrack even if I wanted to. Negative 5 pi over 4, blah, 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 blah. Let me just delete this starting point. I'll highlight the starting point. How about that? All right, directly in between these peaks are our troughs. So go down 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we have our midline crossings. So this is the first period that we would graph. It starts at 3 pi over 4. We go from period, midline crossing, trough, midline crossing, peak. The distance is pi away. Now we just connect all the dots as we continue to fill out the pattern to fill out the graph. And you can extend it back if you want. All right, couple more with this one. Again, I don't like this double parentheses input, so we'll just kind of go through it. For all of these, we're going to write either a sine or a cosine function. So for this one, I see that at 0, an input of 0, we start with the peak. So I'm going to make this a cosine function because cosine goes peak to peak. All right, so I'm looking for where the midline is. Well, the distance between these two look like to be right here. So it looks like the midline is 0. So it's going to be plus 0. It looks like the amplitude, the distance from the midline to the peak, is a distance of 12. So it'd be 12 cosine. It looks like my period is 8 pi. So that means my b must be 1/4, because 2 pi over 1/4 is how I get 8 pi x. And then since my phase shift is 0, because I start there, I don't need a plus c or anything like that. So I'm going to rewrite this as f of x equals 12 cosine x over 4 plus 0. That's it. For letter B, I'm looking to see where's my midline. I mean, you could find the middle point between the peak and the trough. It would be right there. At an input of 0, it looks like I start with the midline crossing. So I'm going to work with a sine function. All right, my amplitude looks to be, well, if I'm going from 7 to 12 or 7 to 2, it looks like my amplitude is going to be 5. So 5 sine of, my period looks like it's pi. So how would I get pi from the 2 pi over b? I think by making my b value 2. So 2x, because that would be 2 pi over 2, which is pi. No phase shift, so plus 0. You can do that if you want. And then we have a midline at 7, so plus 7. So if you want to rewrite this a little bit cleaner, f of x equals 5 sine of 2x plus 7. Bingo. You could write it as a cosine function, but you'd have to include a phase shift. All right, the last one I'm going to do is letter C. Not going to worry about this one. This one is weird because there's a phase shift and it has whole numbers instead of in terms of pi. So let me zoom in just a little bit more with this one. All right, I identify the midline. Just because I like sine, I'm going to go with sine, which would make my starting point here. My starting point is going to be at -1. That's where I start. So I'm going to just delete this so I could use this as my scratch work. I could see that my amplitude is 1, 2, 3, 4. So it'll be 4 sine of whatever, we'll get there, and my midline's at -5. So now my b value works with the period. The period equation is 2 pi over b. Well, I could see that my period, the time it takes for me to repeat, would be a distance of 8. So if I were to solve for b, I would cross multiply. I'd get 2 pi over 8 equals b, which simplifies to b equals pi over 4. So pi over 4x, that's where b goes. And then my c value, let me erase that, I'm sorry. My phase shift, aka where I start, is c over b. Well, we just found our b. Our b is pi over 4, pi over 4. And I want my phase shift to be -1. -1. So I'm going to figure out, okay, well, what could c be? I multiply this by pi over 4, both sides, and I get c is equal to negative pi over 4. So that's my c value. Just remember, as we're writing, there's a negative already in there. So a negative would make this plus. So pi over 4. Yeah. And that is going to end up being my equation. I'm going to pause the video there. Let me know if you have any questions.